Well, long ago I realized that Irene was forgetful in this way. You know, she would forget that we had agreed to go someplace at a certain time and then be surprised when I reminded her that it was time to go.
Irene is a 72-year-old author. During the past 2 years, her family noticed that she had increasing difficulty remembering names, keeping appointments, finding familiar places, and handling money.
It became obvious that she was forgetting much more in ordinary conversation than I had been aware. And then the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease came.
Alzheimer's disease, living in the here and now, has been developed in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association and the National Council on the Aging. The Keepsake program is sponsored by ASI Incorporated and Pfizer Incorporated.
Hi, I'm Frank Field. I'd like to talk to you about memory, aging, and Alzheimer's disease. We all forget sometimes names, words, where we leave our keys. But when memory loss starts to interfere with our daily activities, work, and relationships, well, there could be a problem. It could be Alzheimer's disease. This video will highlight symptoms that may indicate the onset of Alzheimer's disease, the diagnosis, and ways that caregivers, family, and friends of a person with Alzheimer's can hope for a more promising future.
When was Mary first having problems with her memories? I would say about 2.5 to 3 years ago. However, her family tells me that it has been longer than that, but I did not notice it.
I have to cook the food and put it in front of him, whereas at one time he would love to be in the kitchen to cook, and I can't trust him to do that any longer. Slowly, you add up all these things, and it comes to you that it's more than just getting old and forgetting. It's got to be something different, and we find it's Alzheimer's.
There are ways to tell the difference between age-related memory loss and that caused by Alzheimer's disease. For one, the memory loss caused by Alzheimer's disease is much more severe than that seen with normal aging. And while age-related forgetfulness is inconvenient, it usually doesn't harm your ability to function. On the other hand, the memory loss of Alzheimer's disease does affect your ability to function, both in your work and personal life. It's very important for anyone concerned about memory loss to get medical advice. Here's Dr. Larry Eisner to explain more about Alzheimer's disease and how it can affect you.
Alzheimer's disease is a progressive degenerative disease of the brain, and in this condition, brain cells become diseased and malfunction and slowly drop out and actually die. As a result of that, an individual has progressive loss of memory, loss of intellect and other abilities to think, reason, and judge, and with the progression of time actually loses the ability to function independently in society and requires the assistance of others for basic daily needs and necessities. It is normal to develop mild memory problems as people age, but Alzheimer's disease is a very serious problem that affects not only memory, but other areas of cognition or thought, as well as an individual's ability to function on a day-to-day basis.
Alzheimer's affects as many as 4 million Americans, mostly those over the age of 65, and it's on the rise because people are living longer than ever. Alzheimer's disease is the 4th most common cause of death in the elderly, and it's the 3rd most costly to treat, reaching $80 to $100 billion annually in the United States. Teresa is one of the millions of people caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's. Here, Teresa talks about her husband, Frank, and how they cope with his Alzheimer's disease together.
We would have dinner. Maybe 15 minutes later, are we going to eat tonight? I'm hungry. Well, you just had dinner. There are times when he does not know who I am. He will ask me, do you know where my wife is? Do you know when she's coming home?
With a lot of love and support, Teresa and her family are learning to cope with Alzheimer's disease. But they have yet to learn the reason behind Frank's illness. In fact, the exact cause of Alzheimer's disease is not known. It's believed to involve a complex set of changes in the brain that includes a loss of acetylcholine, a brain chemical critical to the function of memory. Alzheimer's disease is characterized by memory loss and other symptoms that may vary from person to person. The more common symptoms include memory loss that affects everyday function, difficulty performing familiar tasks such as using an appliance, problems naming common objects such as a watch or a pencil, getting lost easily, even in familiar places, poor or decreased judgment, problems with abstract thinking, losing things a lot, changes in mood, behavior, and personality, and loss of interest or lack of initiative in usual activities. In spite of the presence of these symptoms, the typical Alzheimer's patient is not diagnosed with the disease for almost 3.5 to 5.5 years after symptom onset. The following caregiver tells how easy it is to miss the early symptoms of Alzheimer's disease.
I'm going back about 3 years ago. His forgetting things, small things, engagements we had, and he would forget about it and I'd have to remind him. But I thought this was all part of getting older and forgetting things. I forgot a lot of things myself, but they got extreme. They got to a point where I would have to write down things for him, or he would jot down things, and it got progressively worse.
The symptoms of Alzheimer's disease do typically worsen over time. However, the progression of the disease varies from person to person. Here's Dr. Eisner to explain more.
Alzheimer's disease can be followed in its progression through several stages. The first stage is a generally mild and relatively benign condition. As the disease progresses into moderate stage, the condition gets worse so that the memory problem becomes all-encompassing, and an individual can't remember to do the things necessary to live alone, unhelped at home. So as the disease progresses over time, an individual loses more and more of their abilities.
Even though Alzheimer's disease can't be cured, much can be done to make living with the disease more manageable. So if you or a loved one experience any of the symptoms we've talked about, it's important to see a doctor and get a diagnosis as soon as possible. Recognizing early symptoms allows time to make medical, financial, and legal plans for the future. It can also prevent dangerous situations and needless stress.
Alzheimer's disease most definitely can be diagnosed by primary care physicians in their office with 85 to 90% clinical certainty in the majority of cases. The first important thing is to have a high index of suspicion of the possibility of Alzheimer's disease. Somebody who's having trouble remembering not just names of people, but things like events, things that they were planning to do, or things that they did earlier that day or yesterday. Person who gets lost places that are familiar to them, lost while they're out driving their car, or something like that. And if there's any evidence at all that the situation's becoming worse over time, that's when you need to start suspecting Alzheimer's disease.
Very often, a person with Alzheimer's disease may not notice the symptoms, but it may be clear to family and friends that something's wrong. It's very important that you talk to a doctor early on if you have any concerns about yourself or someone you know, because early diagnosis can make a difference in the lives of the person with Alzheimer's disease, the family, and caregiver.
One of the reasons for working hard to establish the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease clearly and objectively and early in patients is to be able to offer them treatment.
The good news is that there are many strategies and therapies to help treat the symptoms of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Prescription medicines may help those in early and moderate stages retain cognitive function for longer periods of time. Currently, 2 prescription medicines are available to treat some of the symptoms of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. And scientists continue to study other possible treatment and prevention strategies. Remember, only your doctor can give you the best advice about available treatment options. Teresa discovered that the best way to care for Frank was to first seek help for herself. She found out that there are many resources available both regionally and nationally to support people with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. Every day, Teresa sends Frank to a place called a day service center with a structured program especially designed for people with Alzheimer's. The program gives Teresa time for herself and gets Frank out among other people in a safe setting to practice simple tasks and focus on coping with daily activities. Your community may have programs and resources available for people with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. Keepsake is a program designed to heighten awareness and understanding among older adults and their families about memory, aging, and the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. The program communicates the potential benefits of appropriate recognition, treatment, and management of the disease. Keepsake includes free brochures with tips on managing the disease, addressing the legal and financial issues associated with Alzheimer's, as well as the impact on the caregiver's home, personal, professional, and family life. Through the Keepsake program, you will learn what can cause memory loss and the difference between normal memory loss and the memory loss associated with Alzheimer's. Your local Alzheimer's Association chapter can give you more information about how to live with and manage the condition of the person you care for. Only with support and counseling can people with Alzheimer's, their families, and their caregivers manage the multitude of issues they face. And only with the facts can individuals make the best choices for their health and well-being.
I think the first words out of my mouth would be, don't give up hope, that there is quality time left, there are things we can do that can help, and we'll go through this with you. You're not going to be alone.
From the very beginning, we've taken the stand that we're going to look for the best in any situation. So we've enjoyed, if you can enjoy anything, we've enjoyed Mother as much as we could, and to maximize all the time we've had with her and doing everything with her that we could while she could, and still knowing the reality of what's happened and what's going to happen. Just enjoying what we can when we can.
If you or someone you know is experiencing symptoms of memory loss and it affects everyday living, see the doctor for evaluation, diagnosis, and treatment. If the diagnosis is Alzheimer's disease, take advantage of all the resources that are available. These resources can make the road you're traveling less lonely and easier to bear. Support is there for you to help you make the most of what you have here and now. To learn more about community resources, call the Alzheimer's Association at 1-800-272-3900. And to understand legal and financial issues, call the National Council on Aging at 1-877-390-7828. Keepsake, a program on memory, aging, and Alzheimer's, was developed in collaboration with the National Council on the Aging and the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association and the National Council on the Aging do not promote or endorse any product or service that is mentioned in the Keepsake program. The Keepsake program is sponsored by ASI Incorporated and Pfizer Incorporated. Keepsake is a trademark of ASI Incorporated.